thank you so much for joining me. I have two incredibly special guests today. For those of you who don't know them, I'm going to give you a little bio. Joy Womack began her serious ballet training at the Westside School of Ballet, which is where our lovely guests are today, in 1999. In 2012, Miss Womack made international headlines by becoming the first American female to be invited to dance under contract with the Bolshoi Ballet, where she danced as a soloist. She went on to perform as a principal dancer with Kremlin Ballet Theater in Moscow and Universal Ballet in Seoul, Korea, and then joined the Boston Ballet in 2019. Recently, she performed with the Astrakhan Opera and Ballet in Russia as a principal dancer and assistant to the artistic director. Miss Womack's life is the subject of two recent film projects, the documentary Joy Womack, The White Swan, which was released in late 2021, and the forthcoming Joyka, a biopic based on Miss Womack's time in Russia. And we also have Adrian Mitchell, who's also an incredible ballet dancer, who began his pre-professional ballet training with Westside Ballet at the age of 14. His professional career began in 2015 when he joined the Mikhailovsky, and you can totally correct me on that because I'm sure I got that wrong, ballet company, one of the last Imperial Theaters of the Russian Empire. There he was promoted to first soloist in 2020, performing in featured roles such as Tybalt in Romeo and Juliet, the High Brahmin in La Bayadere, and in principal roles in several contemporary repertoire. And I actually also grew up dancing at Westside Academy, so it's really exciting for me to get to be reunited with the studio. And Joy, you probably don't remember, but my mom's actually the one who first told your mom about Westside when she was first looking for a dance studio to take you to in Los Angeles. So I like to pretend that I'm completely indirectly responsible for your career.
I love that.
And so those are all the wonderful things that both of you have done. What is sadder about your stories at the moment is with everything going on in Ukraine and in Russia, you both had to flee your respective companies and the countries where you've been living and has been your home recently, which is horrible. And I know I and everybody is very devastated by everything that's going on there. I'm really glad that you're safe. And I'm very blessed that you can share your stories with us. So I guess the first thing that I would love to ask both of you, I mean, between the two of you, you represent, because Adrian, you trained at the Vaganova Academy, right?
I finished my training with Broadway School.
And Joy, you trained with the Bolshoi. So between the two of you, for anybody who's not as familiar with ballet, you basically represent the entire collective history of the root of ballet. Between those two companies, that's where everything great in ballet really originated from. So Joy, I guess I'll start with you. Can you tell us a little bit about, I mean, there have literally been incredible documentaries made about your story, which everybody should go up and check out, but what drew you to Russia? What drew you to training there and to making your artistic home there for so long?
At first, the allure of doing something that not very many people had done, I really was very curious about the training style that had produced so many world famous and world-class dancers. I felt like my training and my dancing was lacking refinement and lacking understanding. And so after working with Russian teachers and seeing how much they helped me progress in a short amount of time, I was hungry for more. And then when I went to Russia, something that stands out to me now after performing around the world is the tradition of teacher and student. It becomes a sacred relationship and helps form the dancer into a confident performer with a unique voice. And that tradition of handing down your knowledge from generation to generation and being intimately fostered in your roles, I don't see that anywhere else. And it's something that I love and I will dearly, dearly miss.
What drew you to the Bolshoi specifically, and what was it like doing your training and then working in Moscow, which is, you know, it's the heart of Russia. It's a very different environment than St. Petersburg or other places. What was that all like, and what drew you specifically to the Bolshoi?
Moscow is big. Moscow is the capital of Russia. It is uniquely flamboyant in some ways, and I think the style of the Bolshoi is very much your soul expressing as you wish, as you need. And I felt like myself coming from Westside, coming from a little bit more of a balancing technique, and then honing that into being a professional performer. And Devon Muncie, who was the director of Westside for so many years, spoke so much about your own artistic expression. And I felt like I was really given, even from the first day in the Bolshoi Academy, I was really pushed to kind of develop in that way. Whereas my coaches, who I love dearly and benefited greatly from St. Petersburg, were always a bit more about the refinement, always a bit more about the lines, etc. And so I felt as a performer that style in Moscow suited me for the time that I was there.
And Adrian, what about you? What drew you to Russia? And on the flip side, what drew you more to Vaganova? And what was it like living and working in St. Petersburg?
St. Petersburg is really gorgeous. I also love Moscow. I'm a big Moscow fan. But I love St. Petersburg, like George said, it's incredibly refined, old architecture, classic style. My love of ballet in Russia kind of were separate. I was kind of oddly obsessed with Russia as a kid, which is, I would say, non-characteristic for a young African-American boy in the United States. But I love Russian architecture and culture. And I also love ballet, and I started to realize that Russians were the best dancers, in the world, and their school was, I believe, the strongest. So I studied as well here at Westside with Yvonne, and Yvonne also has a very strong background with Russian teachers herself. So I had already kind of been influenced by that, and I had a teacher here as well in Los Angeles named Yuri Grigoriev, who was a great Russian dancer from Moscow as well. And I met Oleg Vinogradov here in the States. He was the artistic director emeritus of Imperial Ballet for 20 years. He ran that company. And he took me under his wing. He brought me to perform in St. Petersburg. And I kind of should have gotten a job. I couldn't afford to keep studying, but I fell in love with Vaganova school. And I decided, I'm just going to go and see what happens. And I was hooked the first day. It was an incredible tradition that they carry on. And I felt incredibly honored to even be in the room half of the time with dancers who I had idolized for so much of my training, like Siskaridze, who's from the Bolshoi Theater, and Kuzimatov, and Yulia Mahalina, so many amazing Russian dancers and teachers, educators who carry on that tradition. So I got to be there, and I think I molded with the people and the environment, and it molded with me, and I was taken in and ended up joining the Mikhailovsky Theater afterwards.
For both of you, what was the environment like when you first went? Because, certainly before any of our times, but Russia and the West were very separated. And it seems like you both kind of hit at a zeitgeist when Americans were kind of, Joy, you were the first female American ever at the Bolshoi. But when that divide was sort of opening a little bit and people from other countries were coming and studying a little bit more, and it was becoming, I'm not quite sure what the word is, but a little more collaborative nationally, I guess, for the first time. And also just even in the past couple of years with social media and us getting to follow your journeys, but also getting to meet Russian dancers like Maria Horova and getting access to Russian ballet clothing lines and things. What was the environment like when you first went to study there versus maybe how it's changed just even in the past 9 months with everything that's going on?
This might be a long-winded answer, but I'll try.
I love it. Bring it on.
I feel very fortunate and very privileged because I do feel like on my shoulders I helped usher in a new generation of dancers, of international dancers who were able not only to go into study, but to create lives and build families in Russia. And I see culture as an organic bridge between countries. If we don't have cultural exchange, we can't have a conversation because we're not seeing eye to eye. And I think ballet, dance, music is one of the most incredible ways to get to know another culture, get to know people from different places, because it's a universal language, because it speaks to each of us at our souls. So I feel very privileged because going there at a young age, growing up in California and then studying it on the East Coast at Washington School of Ballet, I felt in Kirov Academy of Ballet, I felt very, I had one mind, one track. And when I went to Russia, I felt like it not only opened me to Russian culture, it opened me to the world. It gave me a dance passport that literally wherever I walk into, I feel recognized. I feel like I have friends. And seeing how many beautiful dancers have now gone and studied for a brief period of time, who made their lives there, who have been there for a number of years. I, in my soul right now, am so heartbroken because I wanted to continue to foster this kind of exchange. And I feel quite responsible. I feel almost like a mother in some ways of these beautiful careers and these beautiful places, because Russia is such a wonderful country in a sense of the system that they have for theaters set up. You can literally go to any city in Russia and there's a state-funded theater having plenty of different kinds of performances, classical, contemporary, etc. It is so developed, and dancing in the West, I feel like there's an extreme lack of those opportunities for dancers, and there seems to be such a wide pyramid. We talk so much about diversity, but when we don't have access from the very ground up, it's impossible for dancers to make their way into becoming professional. And that is where I see Russia as superior, because they have built a system where there are places, there are jobs, there are opportunities, so you are not without a hope. Going there at first, of course, it was extremely difficult, but paving the way in anything is not easy. If it was easy, then nobody could do it. And I'm grateful that I had that responsibility. And now I have no words, really, because I wish that this wouldn't happen. I wish that we could go back 3 months, 2 months, and seeing the effect that it has on people. I still have many, many dear friends who are still there, but just seeing the divide so quickly widen and become almost impossible is exactly the opposite of what I wanted to do with my life, which is make that gap, make that conversation as easy and as possible. That answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And Adrian, for you, what was it like first going, and have you seen a change in just the way that openness and exchange has been over obviously the past several months?
Yeah, I won't claim to be as much of a trailblazer as Joy was. She was one of the first, to go over, and I think she set an example for us, a precedent for other international dancers to go and understand that it was safe and it could be effective for your career, and you could learn a lot and experience a lot. And her story, amongst a very few handful of other dancers, were part of what allowed me to go. My family was very much against me going. And I got there right after they kind of cooled down the annexation of Crimea, and the ruble had dropped and the sanctions had really hit hard. But I can say from the time I went there to the day I left, or a few days prior to when I left, the amount of cultural exchange, the amount of collaboration, mutual respect had grown so fast and shockingly so. I mean, you could see it everywhere. You could see it in the language you heard on the street. You could see it in the global events like when we hosted FIFA in Russia. You can see it, the dancers coming in from all kinds of countries, the food, great restaurants. Michelin came. I love food, so I got really excited when the Michelin star came to Russia.
Remember that time when we had that amazing dinner, and there was, I don't even know, 20 international people working in St. Petersburg, and there's Adrian sitting hosting this at the head of the table, and my heart was so full, because maybe, yes, I was one of the first, but I certainly wasn't one of the most successful. There are some amazing dancers doing incredible things at Mikhailovsky at Bolshoi, and just seeing what Adrian had a huge community in St. Petersburg. He was kind of like the king of the international community.
Thank you. We did build quite a bit, and even like the waiter. I remember that night, the waiter was from Africa, and the dancers were international, and there was still Russians like woven in organically. And that was so sad to see because I was leaving Russia. I was on my way out thinking I wanted to start a family, or I still want to start a family, and I wanted to become more close to my family, which I'd seen once a year maximum for the last 7 years. But that was a second home. You know, we were looking at buying an apartment in St. Petersburg. We were looking at having that as a base for us when we're in Europe, and to see our dear friends, Russians and international people alike. And it was devastating to see how much I told myself I'm not going to get emotional in this interview, so I'm going to keep myself composed, but it's extremely difficult to see how much had been lost in such a short amount of time. I mean, the 48 hours that me and my partner packed all of our things and crossed the Estonian border, that 48 hours was just destruction. Of course, destruction in Ukraine to the poor people there who've been bombarded and terrorized, but to lives of many people around Russia and elsewhere who lost so much of what they were building. Joy and I invested, Joy especially, but myself as well, invested a huge amount of our time and resources into building something there. And for that to be taken away so nonchalantly was beyond difficult.
What ultimately brought about for both of you the decision to and the ability to leave? What was sort of the line of demarcation of realizing I need to get out, and how did that happen for both of you?
Yes, you want to go first?
Sure. Yeah, I wanted to leave. There were some things that I couldn't really cope with, even though I still loved Russia. I still love Russian ballet. It's still the tradition that I carry. A lot of politics were getting even stronger and more open coming into the ballet world. Just gross things. And there was small things like healthcare was something that I felt was lacking, decent healthcare. And there was reasons why I had to leave. It was not just the war. I had kind of been inching my way out with my girlfriend for a few weeks. But we didn't have like a set date. We kind of like bought tickets. We left our jobs, but didn't really know what was happening when. And then it was just all of a sudden. And I, maybe naively, I mean, nothing terrible has happened yet to the internationals, and I hope that nothing does to the internationals over there, although the situation is extremely dynamic and volatile. But my family began calling me like extremely, like every day, every few hours. You have to leave, you have to leave. And we had stuff to pack and send. And then there was a day when the flight got canceled. I think it was a Sunday. And on Monday morning, I had movers in my house, moving things and sending them God knows where, wherever, anywhere but there. And we were planning our way to get across because our flight was canceled and we had a small dog. We couldn't fly, we couldn't take the train, we couldn't take the bus. So we walked across the border of Estonia. We took a car there and walked to the bridge. So I think that just minute by minute, I realized that we had to leave. But I would say that this, I think, is a bit of a reflection over really bad things that have been happening for a while in Russia, with politics, with corruption, and it all just kind of exploded into something like this, and it's really sad.
I might have like a different, first of all, I was in Poland, just finishing the principal choreography for Trojka, which I was doing all of the choreography for, and that was a very interesting opportunity, working on a full film, being responsible for choreography. So the 24th was the last day of principal photography. We had a couple of catch-ups like the next 2 days. And so I was already telling them to buy my tickets back to Astrahan. And I get in a huge fight with my husband. I love him dearly, but I was like, of course we're going back, and I hadn't been on my phone or anything. So when you're shooting a movie, you're like from 4 a.m. to 12 p.m. shooting the movie, directing people where to go. And I hadn't really seen the news. So and there's been a lot of conflicts in Russia, and I kind of know that the way Russia goes is it goes like, oh, this is a crisis, and then they kind of like get back to going how it is. So I'm like, oh, you know, it's probably nothing. And then the people who are organizing for us our travel back to Astrahan, because we had a premiere of Ramonda, and I was like, over my dead body, am I not dancing Ramonda? I want to dance Ramonda. They shut down the airports because there were bomb threats, and basically they came back and they're like, it's not possible for us to buy your flight because, and so then I call my director and I'm like, well, they're saying that we can't get through because all of the southern airports in Russia are flights. He's like, oh, just get on a plane and take the train. I was like, I'm not going to take the train for 2 days. Like, that was like crazy to me. Like, no, I have our job, we have our things. Like, I'm going to just wait it out until we can not take the train to get back to. And then the next week, and thankfully to the Polish National Ballet, they had let me take class. So I was like, well, at least I have class. Like, at least I can stay in shape. We'll just wait. And so I was kind of like touch and go with my theater. And then we start seeing things that are happening. And then the sanctions hit, which is they basically shut the SWIFT system down. And in Russia, you don't make a lot of money dancing. And I have a wonderful husband who has been supporting us. And I have kind of seen my life and what I do in Russia more as activism, not as a way to take care of my own expenses because you make so little. And I was really working actually in the direction of becoming part of the government. I received Russian citizenship, and I was very actively looking into law school in Russia, which you do law school in order to become part of the Gosdumo, which is and I had been kind of tapped on the shoulder to start to make a long-term goal of being a minister of culture or doing something. And I was very, very interested in that because my grandmother's a lawyer. So I was thinking very, very long-term in Russia. And when these things happened, I knew that I couldn't be a part of something. And as a dancer there, especially in the regional companies in Russia, you really are a face of the local government. And my company actually made statements for the war. And I knew, one, I was being threatened to by my company saying that I can't make any posts. And so I mean, I still have hopes. I don't want to like put Russia in the trash can. I love the country dearly. It's very nuanced. But as soon as they blocked Facebook and the banking system, there was no way that my husband and I could be living together in Russia safely. And being newly married and thinking about my safety and how we would actually pay for our apartment and pay for our things, like that overnight became an impossibility. And then actually to buy a physical plane ticket for me to go back to Russia was impossible. The cheapest option was 400,000 rubles, which, to put that in perspective, I would be making anywhere from 40 to 150,000 rubles a month. So that's multiple months' salary for a one-way ticket. That would be 40 hours. And my friends, my dear, dear friend Oscar, who was working in our company, had spent a week at the border in a car trying to get into Georgia. So hearing all of those things and hearing how dangerous it was, and like, if I go back, I might not be able to go out. We made the executive decision with my husband to go. I had temporary leave from my company until the end of the season, but my contract runs out at the end of the season, and I'm actively looking for a job elsewhere for next season. So
yeah. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry that happened to both of you. I'm so sorry for, everybody that it's happening to, but just because I have both of you here, it's terrible that you've both had to go through that. And I'm so sorry. How did you both end up back at Westside relatively quickly after it happened? And do you have any immediate plans for like the next couple months while you're figuring out longer term next steps?
Well, I know that when they heard our stories, I want to say, I think it was Jules, the amazing PR person here, thought of us. And
Jules is wonderful.
Yeah, she's great. And she invited us to perform. We were both already in the States. I was in New York for a while. We got performance. Oh, you weren't? Oh, yeah, you just got here. Joy just got here last night. Yeah. I think we both just like jumped at it, and not just to make money. but obviously we'll talk about out of work a bit. But because coming back here is extremely cathartic, and being here in a place where we kind of grew up was so special.
I can't put it lightly. The last 2 months for me have been an absolute nightmare.
Yeah, I'm sure.
But just the light at the tunnel, knowing that I'd be able to be back in the studios with the smell and the same bar and visions of Yvonne and everybody who has loved me forever. I was like, I can get through this. I can just go home to Westside, and if anything, like maybe Westside will take me, because this is not an easy time in the world. Yes, there's a terrible humanitarian crisis going on. Yes, there's a war going on, but we're also recovering from one of the most detrimental things to the arts industry in the history of our art form, the COVID crisis, which caused detrimental damage to the financial infrastructure, primarily to the American arts financial infrastructure, and significant damage to the European. So we are already talking about a constricted, in an already extremely competitive job market. We're talking about extremely selective. So I cannot explain to you the feeling, the deep feeling of rejection, and almost like you worked for so much for and sacrificed so much for nothing when you are just rejected daily from companies. And it has ripped me a new hole. But we're going to keep going on. We get to be on the stage in the next few weeks and just rehearsing here. I think it'll be so therapeutic. And it'll be. I think we're going to have fun on stage. Yeah,
for sure. And for anybody who's watching or listening who isn't super into the classical ballet world, just to add to what you're saying, Joy, something I think that is unique to ballet, I guess it's similar to gymnastics, but a ballet dancer's career is very short, even under the best of circumstances. I mean, theoretically, you join a company when you're in your late teens, maybe your early 20s, depending. And if you're lucky, you get to dance sort of into your early 40s. So with COVID, there's sort of a whole generation of dancers that kind of missed that window of when they would get accepted into a company and then start their journey. And now it's 2-3 years later, and there's the new crop of dancers that are coming up. So it has been very detrimental in a lot of ways. And then to add all of this on top of it is terrible. I'm curious.
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Tell a fun anecdote. It's very fun to be on the audition circuit 10 years later.
Oh,
being
man.
like the 27, 28-year-old, and there's 250 people, anywhere from 17 to 23, all trying to get a job.
Yeah.
I have not done an audition for a few reasons, and that is one of them. I am not ready to. My ego is already too bruised to go into that. So I'm holding off. Anyways, I had an injury that I'm dealing with. But my girlfriend is also actively looking for work. And I see it's not fun.
It's. I mean, if we think it's difficult in the Broadway musical theater world, at least we have open calls. Like that doesn't even really exist in the same way in ballet. So, I'm curious for both of you, because I feel like in the West, especially in America, we have the privilege of living in a little bit of a bubble of the sort of subconscious feeling of oh, well, we're America. Like that's not going to happen here, or that couldn't possibly happen, to us. And I would imagine that being in a country that is your home and to have something like that happen so swiftly and quickly and upend your entire lives and livelihood might change your perspective in the ability for it to happen anywhere. And I wonder if it's changed your thoughts or your feelings on the ability of what's happening in Russia to happen in the States, or for, the persecution of artists, or for a war to break out that upends everything. Has that changed your feelings about it at all?
I feel like COVID did that.
Yeah.
COVID absolutely made art in the US an asterisk, something that, yes, but it wasn't, there was no, actually, we have to make sure that this is a priority. It became even more the thing to, oh, we'll just cancel a performance. I've seen that tendency after after the COVID crisis. It's so, I mean, before no one would cancel a performance, or no one would, oh, we can't just keep this thing going. It's now become so general. Oh, did you hear about that company? They just went to defunct because they have no funding, or oh, they're not doing any performances because they're so limited on finances. And I see that as a fundamental flaw in the American system, that there is no, not even this smallest kind of supplement from the government for artists. And how, I'm going to go back to the diversity thing. How can you talk about creating a diverse group of artists when you have no way to make the playing court in this slightest way equal? There's no form that you can take to say, like, hey, I can't afford for ballet shoes. I can't, that's up to somebody's generosity. And I think I think if we continue in that way, arts will become even more obsolete the more we go on.
Yeah, I think Joy and I both have a specific perspective, which is why I think both of us plan on, and I know we've talked about this privately, taking leadership positions in our field, because we've seen what happens. And I know this interview is not to praise the Russian government. I'll do nothing of the sort. But the way in which the arts are supported by the Russian government, ballet school is free. Performances are not only subsidized by the government, but also full, because the government's supporting the art form, and then people want to go watch, and then they make money on both ends, because the government helps and people actually go to the theater. And the lack of support is glaring. I mean, that's what I'm thinking about myself in my career here, just seeing the way that the contracts are negotiated and funding is acquired for dancers to perform and companies.
There's so many ethical questions, and coming even from a financial background, it makes no sense. And if I were to have to refocus and think of, if I could have a choice and if I could be a help in any way, I'd love to be able to be a part of stabilizing the arts industry in the US in the future. I think the only way that we can have a stable, thriving, American artistic voice on the international stage is by creating at the foundation a different structure.
Yeah.
The Secretary of Arts and Culture.
Yeah.
Like every European country has a Minister of Culture. I know that's probably another interview.
Yeah.
But that is an issue, and I think Joy is just so obvious to us now, being back, seeing the issues, and hoping that maybe while we're here we can make some change.
No, absolutely. And I wanted to ask, because I would think if you're desperately praying for any sort of silver lining from this, we're getting these wonderful voices sort of back here like yours to share what you've learned in Russia and around the world, and be these cultural ambassadors for things that we need and we need to hear. Are there other things that you've learned during your time in Russia? Or Joy, you've obviously danced in many companies, not just in Russia, that you want us to know and you would like to share, and that you would like to be ambassadors for?
I think the financial model that Andrew and I just briefed on, that is the way to create a foundation to be able to build a house, which is a company or a school on. The other thing that I touched on briefly before is the act of creating a culture in the company where you have your coaches and your dancers. I see a great benefit if we switch to that kind of a system in the US as well, because I think a lot of the times what happens in these great American companies is you have a pyramid like this yet again, and a lack of opportunity because there are limited shows. But you also have dancers who are beautiful coming in from school, standing in a quarter ballet rehearsal and not really being seen or not being given things to work on. If I were able to sit in a director's chair and be able to change one thing, it would be having more of that artist, that relationship between teacher and dancer change. Because I have noticed, I've been working in France for the past 2 months. And even there, it's a little bit different. It's kind of a mixture between the two, but it still is very much like everybody, the whole company, let's sit in the studio, there's 2 people working, and then there's going to be 3 or 4 people in the background working. And I don't really see that as a logical and effective way of using time. So using my knowledge from working in Russia, how I would organize it differently, and I would allow different teachers in the company to take their own students. I would try to create a culture of the coach artist mentality.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree totally. Yeah. Yeah. I think you said you hit the nail on the head, so I didn't even know if I could add to that. I think also them demanding more of kids was something we went through, you know, at a young age. I finished my training in Bogota, but before that I studied at Ellison Ballet between being here and graduating, which is an extremely rigorous training program in New York City. And in Russia, kids are expected, you know, kids are expected to reach a certain standard. And I think that can be a great thing for us to be able to bring, you know, the knowledge of the system and all of that.
You had a good point last time we spoke at St. Petersburg, and I think that the artist in Russia has more weight. Like there was no problem for me to just have a conversation with my director about things I wanted to do or things I felt like I wasn't being challenged on. And I feel like here it's very like, oh my God, the director is coming. And I think that distance is very toxic, and it creates an environment where you're expendable, or you know, you don't have any weight. You can't have a conversation with me. And in all honesty, like I worked for many different directors, but the places where I always felt the most artistically challenged, it was when I was having a face-to-face conversation that was upfront and honest with the director on where he saw I was lacking and where he saw that I needed to be pushed more. And just having that freedom of like, hey, I'd like to do Giselle this, or no, hey, I actually don't see you in that, I see you with this and that. And hearing where he was coming from and working on those different things, you know, I think that a lot of American artists would benefit from that, because I hear a lot from my friends who are, for example, with ABT or Boston Ballet, San Francisco. It's like, I don't really know. I have a meeting once a year with my director, and they don't come to class, they don't watch company class, so they don't really know me. I feel like if the director isn't there actively involved with the company, it's very difficult to foster artists that are going to be able to invest long term in your company.
Yeah, absolutely. Joanna, sorry to interrupt.
Go ahead.
Well, Joanna both had solo roles early on, which is rare in America.
Yeah.
We were immediately thrown into things that were challenging, but it makes you raise the bar.
Yeah.
So I think that's another thing, you know, giving opportunities, having these sorts of opportunities in order for young dancers to not have their first principal role at 35, you know, at 28. You know?
And that's having been so difficult. You know?
Impossible.
Coming to working in the film industry, like very brief, you know, interview in that, and seeing the way how artists are able to have weight and negotiate their contracts, and coming from a background as an American trained artist, we're just so grateful. And that's the wrong attitude to have. You provide value, you're there sacrificing, you know, you want input, and it's very much like until the last day you're on stage, like, oh, you should be so grateful for this opportunity. And I think that creates a toxic culture inside of the companies.
Yeah, one of the things, I mean, I haven't lived and worked in Russia, but one of the things that I've admired looking from the outside is how artists are really seemingly very respected, and they are very much ambassadors. And I think that artists, that's part of our role in the culture and society. And I wish that that would be true everywhere, because I think there's a lot of power in that. And, you know, storytelling is a very important aspect of us as human beings. And that's where we get empathy and everything from. So I love everything that both of you are saying. And actually, speaking of Boston Ballet, Joy, how did you come to start dancing with these other companies and come back to the States at Boston Ballet and then go back? And what brought about a lot of those shifts for you?
Well, I was working in Korea at the time. I enjoyed immensely the challenge of working in Korea. It taught me so much about the value of hard work. But at the time, I was actually being invited to do a lot of international guestings, and I felt like I was missing out on some of those opportunities because being in Korea, it's not financially viable for a lot of these organizations to do that pre-pandemic. And so then I actually ended up coming back to Moscow, where I had an apartment, and just guested with a ton of companies for a season. I mean, a full season I was with a different company every 3 months, and that was really beautiful. It opened my eyes. At the same time, training in different methods for injury prevention and studying in university in Moscow. One of the places where I was studying, he was a good friend of Nico Niesman, the director of Boston, and I felt very pressured by the people who were kind of in an older place and kind of just looking down their nose at me guesting at age 25, like, oh, it's too early. And I, on the other hand, was really enjoying kind of learning from all of these different places and dancing what I wanted to dance and being able to set limits, etc. And so I took a job after our conversation, thinking it would be one way, hearing promises and assurances, and then coming and seeing that completely not happen. I learned a lot at Boston Ballet. I'm very grateful for them for hiring me. But it taught me a lesson to not undervalue my worth. And one of the first conversations we had with Nico is, I'm a principal dancer, I'm not a corps de ballet dancer, and I took a corps de ballet contract. And that was a great lesson in humility, and I'm grateful for it. But I don't think I would repeat that same mistake again, because what I offer, the skill set I have, is of a principal dancer, and it's not a corps de ballet dancer. It's a completely different scope of work.
Yeah.
And to my benefit, this is terrible to admit, the pandemic happened, and everything had to shut down. And I had full kind of faith that I would return to Boston Ballet, but in the meantime, my dear friend Dimitri Godana from Bolshoi Ballet, he had created pieces on me before, and really was wanting to create. He became the artistic director of Astrakhan Opera Company, which is a city on the Caspian Sea of Russia, which is very prosperous. And so they had a big budget, and what he wanted to do is bring a lot of balancing repertoire to that region, and specifically things that weren't performed before, or these audiences have never seen anything like that. And so he offered me not only to come as a principal dancer, but also as a guest repertoire and an assistant artistic director. So for me, that was a really interesting challenge, and helped me develop skills for what I wanted to do eventually in my life, which might be an assistant director of a company, or person in the government that's doing things for artists. So I saw it as kind of a silver lining, and I ended up going to the company, taking a leave of absence from Boston Ballet, and it turned into a more full-time thing. So I hope that answers your question.
Absolutely. I'm so surprised that they would offer you a core contract, especially since you'd been a principal at many companies. That just, it surprises me.
It would be like hiring a dentist to do your heart surgery. Like, I can't fathom that.
Well, it's a gig practice in the ballet world, and many people do it and then spend years unhappy. And I learned my lesson. I got to do some really interesting and fun things, but I'm a principal dancer.
Yeah.
And I'm hard for that title, so I never.
Is it sort of a mentality of like, well, you're not a principal dancer here until you've worked your way up here, kind of a thing?
I think so. And it also, like, I'm so sorry to all the men. There's really this kind of existing thing in the dance world where it's like, I was a male principal dancer, so I now have been sitting in a director's chair. I'm going to tell you what point shoes you need to wear. I'm going to tell you how you need to do your point work, how you need to act. And I really think there's something toxic about it. We need more diversity. We need more women in powers of leadership as well, because there is certainly, especially in the United States, which is so interesting because we're supposed to be the most free country in the world. If you look at the collective of directors around the country, it's mostly white male men who've been in their positions for over 10 years.
And it's not just dance, it's in theater, it's everywhere, it's across the board.
And I will say this, shockingly straight for the collective of dance. It doesn't actually, I mean, straight white men in dance is not the majority of dancers. So why would
it's like a club of men who are pros, who are, we did galas with each other way back when, and let me tell you what point shoes you need to wear, and you need to prove to me, be a good little girl, put out, these kind of like very, old fashioned, and I would, if I had a daughter or a son, and I were able to put them in this industry, if we don't have change, I couldn't do that, because I can't subject, my future children or my dance future children as in my students to that, because I don't see a healthy place in America where you can have, hi director, like, I'm so-and-so, this is what I can bring, and if you don't agree with that, like, where do you see me in the company? How can I be used? It's like having that conversation is, oh, you're a person who goes to the director. Oh, you're, it's shamed.
Yeah.
Or, excuse me, I'm having an injury right now, or I can't do this today. Right away, oh, let's put somebody else in, let's do this. It's like, you don't have a right to exist, and that is wrong.
I want to ask both of you, because both of you have obviously done lots of interviews, had documentaries and everything. One of my favorite questions to ask artists is, what's something that you've always wanted to be asked in an interview and never have been? And how would you answer it?
I knew that question in advance, so I would have brainstormed. Oh, that's a hard one. Mine would have been, what's the change that I want to see?
Mm-hmm.
And I only answer that question.
Yeah.
Yeah, the change that I would want to see, that's a great question, is I want more opportunities for dancers. Like, I think,
yeah.
Or one question that I would ask somebody else would be, how do you educate the American population into becoming theater goers?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think that we cannot have a competition with opportunity unless you're able to build an audience. And I think that you have to appeal to the American mentality, which is going through the mediums that are known to them, which is Hollywood, which is Netflix, which is bringing ballet to the big screen, and then in creating more of a culture of acceptance for male dancers, whatever male, transgender, different sexual orientations, seeing that as something that's to be, to kind of, I would almost want to feature more and more of the male dancing, the male classical dancing, and show kind of what bravura difficult thing it is to be, so that we could destigmatize that, and I think that would create more and more opportunities for people to be interested.
Yeah. I had an Uber driver the other day who said, I can't drive further than New York and Russia, and I was too scared to drive in Russia, and no one drives in New York. So I was in the Uber the other day, and he got so excited. Somehow, I usually don't say I'm a dancer, ballet dancer. I don't know why. I don't want to get too into it most of the time. But he finally, the conversation got to the point of me saying I'm a ballet dancer with my girlfriend there. And he's like, oh my God, he freaked out. He said, but it's cool to me that you're a dancer, but I'd probably never go to a ballet. It doesn't seem like a place where I fit in.
Right.
I was like, that's a problem.
That's a problem.
I would rather get rid of all the people that you think belong in a theater and bring in everybody else. That would be much more satisfying to me. Yeah. If the orchestra left seats that were $300 were empty, or the other ones that were $35 were all full, that's not going to see. That's not going to make it happen. The change of one. Ideally, we could all coexist, right? That would be the ideal. But his patronage is much more important to me than someone who's paying for.
I agree. Yeah. And what can we be doing to help what's going on in Ukraine and in Russia, and artists and non-artists? Is there anything that you know of that we should be doing or can do to help the situation going on right now?
I know the American Red Cross is doing some beautiful work. I've just been traveling around Europe extensively, and at each train station there's a station of American Red Cross, and they're actually helping refugees get off trains, and helping them get food and water and housing. I think housing is one of the most, my husband and I sponsored a few people to be able to find temporary housing in Prague, in Poland. But if you can help, there are different artists in Kiev and in Odessa, and a lot of them have fled to Kiev, which is a city in eastern Ukraine, and they're still putting on performances. So I know that different dance retailers are collecting materials and shoes and things, and things like that to send to them. But immediately, I think it's all been displaced. So donating to the Red Cross and donating to different organizations to help put food and necessities into people's hands is extremely important. And don't throw the Russians out with the bathwater.
Yeah.
There's extreme pressure right now to kind of Russia, immediately put them back. But that is would be doing the Russian people such a complete disservice. Knowing the Russian people dearly, being now Russian myself, a lot of these people don't have a choice but to live in the place where they are. We are so privileged. It's recognizing our own privilege. I myself have been extremely privileged to be able to choicefully go there, to choicefully have a career, to be able to choicefully look for a job, yes, to handle with rejection, but that's all because of my privilege. To know that there are people who are stranded, who can't get out, who have to live there, and not vilifying them. I think that's the only way we can work towards a more peaceful world, is to not see people as the enemy, but see the people who are in power in the government as the people who are making these decisions. I think that's the only way we can go forward.
Yeah, I think that, like you said, discarding the Russians, especially the ones, specifically the ones that are against the war, and maybe are not even feeling comfortable to speak out against it because it is not safe. And I do feel comfortable speaking out. I've heard stories only when we came back here or we're out of Russia. Those are our best friends who actually make a change, the ones who are against it. And we hope one day we'll be able to take matters into their hands and end this. So yeah, not discarding the Russians. Like I always try to say that. I try and put most of my people to the Ukrainian people, but we still should, understand that Russian people are suffering in ways, and they will continue to, hopefully, to a large extent, as things get worse.
They have, I was sorry to butt in, but it's like most people don't even have the privilege to have the information to help them make an informed decision. So that's where my heartbreak comes from, because if you don't have access to anything that can show you something, how can you get on board with something? Like I live in a different city than Adrian. Adrian lives in St. Petersburg and in Moscow. People have more access, but for example, my dearest friends who are in Ostrahan, they don't even know about what's happening there, except for the things like when I try to send them screenshots, etc. They're like, this isn't happening. That's not true. That that couldn't be real. Look, I have sisters and cousins, and like the information is blocked. So I don't know. It's just it's easy to say like, oh, Russians should protest. They should hate on their government. It's like, well, they don't even have the privilege to have that information. They can't make those decisions, and that's what's hard.
Yeah, I lived above the protest. I wouldn't even go outside, or I would like go around the whole area because I know that like special recognition. Yeah, I would have probably been arrested, or at the border they would have. When I left Russia, I had a full interview with the FSB, which is like the new KGB, asking me if I liked Russia, what I thought, if I was angry, if I, I didn't understand that like protesting there, it's not like protesting here. Not that protesting here is ideal, we solve our issues, but there it's like you just disappear. People just like.
I haven't heard from their sister in 3 weeks. I have many friends who have disappeared. I think.
Yeah.
So many thoughts, but I can't.
I understand. Yeah.
I even don't talk about all my close friends and try not to even associate with them, because via maybe Telegram or something. I mean, it was crazy. They all downloaded Telegram. Like no one had Telegram, and all of a sudden it's like this is the only way we can actually communicate with each other. I was still there when the Facebook started not working and all that.
So I now not only does my general director get extremely upset at me, but because my posts that I thought over for 2 weeks, and I was asked when I joined a new company in France to make a statement, and I resisted as much as I could and agonized over this piece. I posted a very, very neutral thing that didn't mention the war or anything in it, and I was still accused. I'm now a traitor. I'm now listed as I'm political, which is considered, if you're political and dance, that's it. So who knows if I would be safe going back to Russia right now. And I have been very fearful for some of my dear friends. I know that they have been questioned and they have been asked different things because they're associated with me. So that is very everything.
Do you think that will change at some point and it'll be safe for you to go back?
I trust in the fact that time heals everything. And that's one thing I've learned in Russia, is that things definitely ebb and flow. And let's see how the situation is. I think most of my dear friends who I'm in contact with, their mindset is and what they're being told that this will all be over soon. So like one of the people I'm in contact with is like, oh yeah, sure, you're going to be back next season, but this is all going to be over. We heard it's going to be over in May, you know. Yeah. So they keep getting told this narrative, and I think they don't want people to see this as the end of things, because then they would lose hope. So I am hopeful. I don't see this as an end to my journey in Russia. But
I think to express hope is to encourage change, and if we just say that's it, you know, there is no hope. But I think that if we can express hope, we can believe that there will be a huge change and a reconciliation, some sort of reparations done that can start to reverse the damage that's been done so far.
Yeah. Even in the best of circumstances, when you were there, how separate was the art world from what was going on politically? I mean, we're very fortunate in America to have freedom of speech, and that's not exactly the case in the same way. Were the arts ever, did you feel free to sort of comment politically, or has it always just sort of been, no, like you dance, you don't say anything, you toe the party line?
I worked for the Kremlin, which is a company financed by the Office of the President of Russia. Worked there for many, many years. And I will say that Russians are not political in the way that Americans are, where we kind of like Facebook posts and explanation, you know, why I don't like the president, etc. It taught me a different way of thinking, but I feel very informed by that experience of working there. I certainly never expressed any political views, not in fear, but also in understanding that it's a faux pas. It's what people speak about politics around their kitchen table, not in society and out. It's also considered kind of bad taste as well. I don't know if
yeah. No, I mean, specifically as artists, I didn't speak out. I mean, I don't know. I spoke out about the Black Lives Matter whole thing that happened. Because I founded a nonprofit to help social justice causes, which is partially based here at Westside. But when it came to Russian politics, I would have never spoken out. And I don't know, I mean, some dancers did, but very calmly. And many just left, many Russians I know just left, and international people all left. But no, I don't think that people are going to just go out. The average person won't. I lived right in the center when there was the protests, of course, for the war, but also when Alexei Navalny was arrested. And I could see them, they were like flooding the street below me. And I just thought those are some brave people, because in this country, I wouldn't be out there.
Yeah. Well, just as we wrap up, what can we be doing to support you personally? How can we follow you on social media? How can the wonderful artistic directors out there get you job offers, as they all should be doing? What can we be doing to support you?
Come to watch us perform on Saturday, the May 7th, Petite Soireé, if you're in LA.
Mm-hmm. Hire us if you have
if you want to hire us, we'll come for a day. We'll come for a year.
So we will come. We teach over online. We feel so grateful to be here at Westside. So yeah, exactly as Adrian said, come and watch us dance. If you're an artistic director and you have a position open, Andrea and I are looking for a job for next season.
What are your websites and social media handles?
Joy Womack, Instagram, on YouTube.
Adrian Womack and Mitchell on Instagram. Yeah, and then follow us. I have a nonprofit organization which works for justice causes to create more diversity, equity, and inclusion in the arts. We support young Black ballet students, give them scholarships, paper point shoes. It's called Dance in Color. You can go to danceincolor.com to donate to that. A little disclaimer: no one makes any salary, so any money that you give to Dance in Color goes directly to young students, some of which will study here at Westside and abroad.
That's wonderful. Thank you both so much for your bravery and for your artistry and for taking the time today to chat. I know you need to get to rehearsal. Thank you for taking the time out of your rehearsal. It's such a joy to talk to you, and please keep us posted on how everything's going.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.